So with this setup in the environment and the pervasive social environment, you start to get this blurry overlap between reality and scripted fantasy to the point that valid thinking about the incongruities in the environment become more and more feasible, but yet more and more plausibly deniable, because the collusion of the environment is more and more integrated, more plausibly deniable, still decentralized and compartmentalized. Psychiatrists and mental health officials and operatives working there, if you look, are always in various degrees, as already formulated in these other systems of manipulation, colluding with that process, and as a whole, and there are individuals embedded in those systems that are more witting, more willing, and more rewarded or threatened so as to arouse their cooperation. If you think about those who are at the top echelons of power and what they get out of it, their motive is clear. If you see that the methodologies exist and that that's the game they're playing, it's easy to see how they could do it. And the opportunity spans the history of humanity since before history. Its entire existence as a power struggle with itself and with its environment is the opportunity that these things have had to occur. The crime can be found in the misery, the injuries done by these things, the falsification of environments and social systems, the destruction of spiritual significance of that world and its activities to turn into a nihilistic, meaningless, ominous, inimical kind of construct rather than a genuine expression of spiritual reality in these manifest forms. So it's a great fraud on a metaphysical and spiritual level as well, especially the more pervasive and technologically ramified it is, and the more motivated and supported are the participants, the perpetrators. So this ongoing program dovetails in with all the others, obviously. The counterfeit racketeering going on assists it in a way that blends in because all the currency looks the same whenever it's trading hands. But some of it came from an illegitimate source and was used illegitimately on its way to being laundered down to the average working man's use, and further embezzlement schemes to set up fronts for these operations involved the transactions. And double book accounting and various other systems of fraudulent finance and manipulation of commercial transactions, and obviously all this can also be integrated with the psychotronics and embedded fifth column activity, so that even standard valid contracts can be manipulated and distorted in favor of the agendas set by those who do the manipulation. Even conventional economic activity can be manipulated and used to manipulate individuals for threat of loss of job, for threat of not being entered into a guild or a union, for threat of not being promoted, and so on. Recalling They Live, again, I like referring to They Live. It's an ample repository of examples. Remember in the store, whenever one of the real human and the alien creature were in the same aisle shopping for food, and one says, I'm so depressed, I've got passed up for promotion again. And then the alien's all content because he's riding the gravy train, and he's like, stop worrying about it, it'll come. And then and then the plausible deniability, because psychotronics in that world is used to disguise their difference from everyone else, which is, in our term, plausible deniability of a psychopath that looks just as human, or is protected by systems of manipulation, as I've been talking about, so that by degrees evil is more and more protected and insulated from defamation and attack, and anyone not in on the scheme is used as fodder and expendable resource. And he says, "Don't worry, you'll get it." And then he, of course, he's not convinced, and then he gets a backhanded consolation again from the alien creature, and he just sits back in silence, stymied by the incongruity of it all. So stop your whining, chiding that suggests that the persons who are not favored by these covert systems are somehow, victim blaming. That goes on. That also goes on in scenarios where people are being reprogrammed by environments that have captured them and wish to brainwash them or torture them, such as those who were captured by communists or prisoners of war in certain conflicts, or captured by the rebels, or kept hostage for ransom, whatever. The kind of conduct brought to bear against the psyches of those individuals is similar to the kind of being in a fishbowl at large that's experienced by those targeted by these covert Civil War weapon systems. Of course, integrated all together into one lump sum, and let's just say it was all focused on a specific group or set of individuals. Can you imagine the way that this works so that the full weight of conditions in the world, as they might appear legitimate or quasi-legitimate, are redirected so that it dovetails in with the crushing of scapegoats and expendable, perhaps hazardous, expendable individuals or groups perhaps hazardous to the system of control. And everyone that's not directly targeted would rather not know about it, not face it, especially if it keeps the devil away. And likewise, anybody that should be concerned has to encounter the system, because it will target anyone that takes an interest in it or is concerned with it, as you would expect. And for example, if I were a scout spying on the enemy and I were detected by a patrol, I might want to try to kill that patrol, especially if it's just like a 2 or 3 man patrol. And I was, a well-seasoned operative, a scout operative, I might probably try to kill them off and rack up more points for myself as a soldier and a scout, and protect the information that I was there, and protect the value of the information I gathered. I mean, so that's anyone that takes an interest in them they're gonna take an interest back, and also they're going to want to see if they can spin the encounter in their favor. Remember in They Live, whenever Nada was caught in the alley by the 2 officers who happened to be the rogue alien psychopath type, and they were like, well, they just, now you cool it, and they cooled him right in the alley, and alleys are a pretty big theme, as well as many themes in the movie are analogous to many things that go on in our world here that don't have to be just directly mapped over into the content of the movie, but we'll leave that aside for now. I wanted to get into a fuller analysis of They Live in more videos, but destabilization occurred with my job and my living conditions. So as I told you, I have firsthand experience of all these weapon systems, and so, but given my nature, I'm going to analyze and I'm going to figure it out. I'm not going to break or back down. But I can't get into those further videos until I get to a circumstance where there's a stable environment to produce them in. Obviously, being in noisy cafes and restaurants isn't going to cut it for that. Can't just find some place in a park and do it, because you're going to I'll probably get it, visited by vectoring, what I call cell-tarded meat drones, or cell phone guided human drone systems. It's just people that are just looking at their cell phone. It either through lily waves or direct communication tells them where to go. Sometimes they're playing Pokemon, and through proper backdoor hacking, Pokemon can be reprogrammed per individual to target specific locations. It has nothing to do with the game as a whole, and lead to certain types of manipulations on par with an unwitting but very willing participant in one of these harassment programs, right? So again, plausible deniability, it helps get the effect and minimizes the chance for blowback directly onto the program. If something happens to the expendable doofus, then as far as they're concerned, that could be two birds, one stone. I mean, I was just harassed by what I call weaponized bum. That's a bum who just does what he does anyway, but through various means, they can be sort of led along to keep running into somebody that's targeted and can be induced by psychotronics dovetailing with their already existent impulses and proclivities and inclinations, lead to conflicts, which, let's just put it this way, I had to get him off my back somehow, kept jumping in my face and being threatening, so I pushed him away, and then I just said, you know what, this is going to escalate to the point that I got to hurt somebody that's old, infirm, drunk, doesn't really know he's part of a weapon system that's directed against me, doesn't understand the psychological damage it causes or contributes to. I'm just going to call the police. Instead of asking Kirby Lane to get rid of him, something they wouldn't like to have to get involved in doing, I just said, hey, call the police. The police came, as predicted. They found the knife on me, which was a legal weapon to have. I have a legal weapon. I have all kinds of legal weapons. Look, I knew it was probable that this might happen. Now, they asked me for ID. I was getting out my ID, and then my coat opened, they saw the knife, and of course their protocol is to react when they see that, and it's not perhaps appropriate, but they're in a circumstance where there was a heated interaction between two people, and they don't know whose story's what. They look at both suspiciously. So these systems, they just kind of stick to a person, make them sticky to more and more problems. And then after it was resolved, so they had to go a separate way, and I went back into the cafe. Basically, just the overall impact was negative toward me, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just trying to get this guy in my face. He kept on harassing, following, getting up in my face. Aside from the odor that's coming out of his mouth every time he opened it, it was just unpleasant to have a guy with his outstretched arms constantly getting in my face and harassing me and getting within a foot of my face. Even if he is 5 foot tall, and I could beat him with both hands tied behind my back. And I mean, what if he's got a little knife or a shiv that he can just snap out and hit me in a moment when I'm not looking, because I got too comfortable with him being in an inappropriate distance from me, just because I'm overconfident that he's not going to be a threat. I don't have to put up, so I pushed him out. But I knew that was going to lead to more problems, so I had police involved. Even then, I got handcuffed because they saw the knife, and then until they worked it out, and then their protocol is so stringent that they didn't uncuff me until the knife was placed back with my things at my table, so that they could feel maximally safe. Apparently, safety for the officers comes first. When you're just another member of the public, they don't know. I mean, think about the guy in They Live who questioned Nada at the magazine stand. What's your problem, right? So there he is, all nice and well dressed. He's just about his business, and he gives the magazine rack dealer a minimal hassle. And of course, he likes kissing up to wealthier people, and he hopes he's gonna. That's why he went to L.A. to. He wanted to be a star, and he wanted to hobnob with the wealthy people. But he ended up having to settle for a job as a magazine rack salesman or manager. In a situation of conflict where the police come, leaving aside the alien covert fifth column, just talking about circumstances as they are in our civil environments. It depends. If I were in a different social strata and were, even my being armed would not be such an issue. But being unarmed obviously would help the case. So that, I mean, they didn't do anything to him. They knew who he was. He's a regular on the strip, regular alcoholic, weaponized bum system. And of course, I'm sort of an unknown to them. They've never had interactions with me. They've seen me around, but so. It's just that the overall interaction is negative toward me no matter what, no matter how I resolve it. If I don't do anything, it keeps going on. If I do something else might happen. It could get complicated. They had to detain me and then shackle me up while we were sorting it out. So there's that exposure I'm seeing in that light by people. It's just overall negative. This is how the harassment campaign sort of picks up on its own steam. Everything in the environment can become polarized against somebody if enough different things avalanche together into one snowball eventually. If nothing else, the byproduct is that all these stresses are integrated into the same person, and they've got to deal with all of them balled up together in an incoherent knot. Although they can tell it's sort of an inimical process directed against them from various vectors, but probably with one overall intent to destroy and corrode that person's life. Of course, I know how the system works, and I know all the way to its root, and I can typically, with intuition and just good observation and let's just say divine providence, kind of spot the handlers and the operatives as they roll along, because, look, let's just face it, these people are cardboard cutouts of each other. They're hollow-souled individuals. If they had a soul, it's getting hollowed out by the day because of these involvements. This is a demonic process that corrupts and destroys those who participate in it far faster than it does anyone it targets. And they're doomed in the end to divine judgment, which is coming imminently. And as it approaches, let's just put it this way, things are not spinning in their favor the way they want them to anymore. All kinds of systems are losing their stability. And they're in need of another, as they said in the PNAC document, another Pearl Harbor. So look out for a new false flag to help integrate all these systems back together into one new us against them narrative theme to help reset it back into a stabler form of operation. But right now, as it stands, they're slipping a lot, and as a person survives and grows in strength and develops more knowledge and experience with these things, it becomes easier to spot and analyze and make sense out of it in real time. I mean, that's the only positive upshot of all this that I can make out. And because of that, then I can relay this information to others and accelerate other people's learning process. That's sort of what a lot of people involved in these things are doing. Whether they're whistleblowers who broke out of the system, or just targeted individuals who woke up to it, or just very intuitive, sage-like schizophrenics running around the street that just put it all together in one epiphany and refuse to let go of that vision, come what may, and hell or high water, and so suffered a different kind of fate than someone who could sort of continue to function and integrate the information over a longer period of time without, let's just say, too much artistic acting out and cathartic ebullience, which caused too much alienation in too short a time for that to be a sustainable long-term process of, let's just say, constructive adaptation. But it certainly helps to have various kind of cushioning resources at one's disposal. It helps to have experience of a time before these processes were in motion. It helps to have not been born with 10 times the number of vaccines being injected into you throughout your youth and in generations that come after you. It certainly helps if many of these weapon systems that are now well integrated, like the ground wave emergency network, the Gwen Tower system, the Wi-Fi and microwave tower systems, and the HD digital screens, and the security tampered communication systems, the tablets, laptops, computers. All these devices are being modified with backdoors and with always-on tracking systems and surveillance systems, so that, or just remotely controllable and hackable from the NSA and so on. And this leads to kinds of effects on people's ability or willingness to break free of these kind of covert tyrannies that are exponentially greater, even just from one generation to the next. So, look, this is the cushioning of one's previous experience with a normality or a status quo that was unaffected by these systems that helps. Helps develop resilience and some degree of immunity from it. And the sooner one catches on, the better, so intelligence helps. If one can have the discipline to study a lot of information through various sources, get an education, or just take an active interest in the truth and pursue it doggedly enough and put all one's talents to that effect, that can cushion someone from a lot of the trauma that without those resources, people would just crack, fracture, disintegrate, implode, explode, and the system constantly studies and analyzes and learns from how it affects these people. It studies all kinds of walks of life and and methods of harassment and manipulation. It's like a demonic. The movies Cube, Cube 1, Cube 2, and Cube 3 all highlight a scenario where a kind of sadistic experimental system is set up to analyze the effects of no-win situations or high attrition, likely to lose situations on groups and individuals in groups that have to go through these things, and to figure out sort of systematically and empirically, statistically, what the effects are, and then just collate that information and move it up the chain to less compartmentalized project directors who analyze it. And Cube movies 1 through 3 are worth researching for the themes and narratives that I'm talking about in another light. Any John Carpenter movie as well, and various others that you can see on my channel in the listing that gives the various Gnostically relevant movies by having re-uploaded movie trailers. So yeah, these conditions, being as they are, cannot be ignored, and we cannot rely on conventional narratives of analysis and response and adaptation and response in order to deal with them. This will be exponentially behind the curve, just from one generation to the next. Now imagine several generations in. It would be like not knowing that there was a deep blue and trying to win a chess tournament against someone who's got an implant with Deep Blue telling them the moves back in the early 1800s. You get wiped out every time. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest player in the world, actually. Systems that can be decks that can be stacked in that way by parties interested in stacking the deck are always going to have a portion of the benefits accrued to them reinvested in consolidating the deck stacking that they do and ensuring that it continues to be stacked in their favor in a stable, long-term way. Because getting caught at that would both take away their fabulous little, wonderland of corruption that they're enjoying, and put them in a very bad situation simultaneously. It's just also, it seems that in the upper echelons of these control grids, it's not in their nature to exist the way the true praying, fighting, working man does in a real society. And so, as far as women and children go, for the most part, they adapt in ways conciliatory or not conciliatory to the system, and they're incorporated into it or rejected from it accordingly as well, just as the men are, but in ways that are suited to their difference in development and sexual psychology. So all these elements are studied now. Now remember, artificial intelligence is integrated into it, and the perversity of those involved in managing it cannot be overestimated. And it's found that look, the entire system is perverse, and its byproduct is perverse and a perversion. So this going on, when I speak of covert fifth columns, it's hard to not understand what I mean. But again, I want to talk about an exemplified form of it: the mobilized mystery shopper Wawa Club. Okay, you know what mystery shoppers are, right? The people that get paid to go visit places and act like, mind you, that they're just regular patrons, customers, or clients. Now they might have been anyway, but the point is that now they're part of an agenda where they are recruited to pay attention to the service and the good in question. You know, food tasters, investigators that are looking for counterfeiting of brands. They enter bars. They get the liquor. They don't drink all the liquor. They drink a little, but they put some in a container and they leave with it, and they go analyze it at the lab later so they can catch people selling counterfeit, Black Label or whatever. Basically, anytime someone has to have a presented appearance but another agenda that they want to keep secret from the other party, it's almost like a racket, but it's presumed to be an investigative service that's supposed to help give an honest assessment of the quality of the goods or services, right? Either for either for law enforcement purposes or just for the protection of the consumer and the enhancement of the consumer. Plus, it's a service in itself if it truly does what it says, and so the consumers benefited, and so consumer groups and then consumers would pay to get that information. It would enhance the quality of their products to consumers who would be interested in it, and then advertisers could bleed into that for their interest, but the corruption that could be embedded in that is clear, right? Nepotism. Who gets a mystery shopper job, right? Just anybody? No. Nepotism is going to be a factor. Covert Fifth Columnry is already in operation, so that's a cush job if there was one, right? To just go from one hotel to the next, or just to star in commercials about going from one hotel to the next. There's like this hotel commercial on TV these days. I can't get away from TVs anymore. After 20 years of not watching single TV, I cannot get away from them. They're everywhere. They used to be on the buses here in town. I know they are in LA. They weren't here on the buses here, but they are in LA. You can't get away from TVs in some places. Anyway, point is that there's a commercial about a guy basically. He can also clone himself magically by TV magic and play various roles of people that go to hotels and give their reactions to them. And I'm not sure if he's advertising for a hotel or for maybe like William Shatner, just as a service that investigates the best price and quality of different hotels and all that. But either way, think about that job. That's what that guy does. He acts like something in front of a camera and gets paid enough not only to live well, but live very well. He doesn't have to do a damn other thing. It's just like in They Live, the lady on TV. All I ever have to do is be famous, and I'll be rich, and everyone will love me, and I'll never have to work, and I'll never have to die. It's just, and of course, there's Nada in the alley just suffering from aerial gang stalking from a helicopter, and happen to be in that sort of toxic environment while this TV's bleeding this other form of torture onto him by showing him this whole other form of existence. She could be considered sort of in line with the people who are successful or integrated into the show business racket, as well as just the media racket, the propaganda racket, the commercial racket, as part of a sort of an elite elect group of beneficiaries of these rackets who hold up the iconography of opportunity in front of people and of viability of goods and services in the form that they're in, and sort of just add more noise to the background of the culture so that people are sort of embedded in a programming, a constantly programming mixture of signals that prevents them from thinking independently about any given aspect of this circumstance. It has to be constantly given positive pressure from the counterfeiting racketeers and the Covert Fifth Columnry already embedded to keep people's consciousness on the back foot from being aware of these things. Just how a confidence artist constantly comes front heavy with the charm and with the pizzazz and the distraction and seizing the initiative at every moment to prevent you from actively processing any of his claims or his rhetoric so that you can get a more objective view of the situation you're in. And he constantly leads you with all these kinds of manipulations, ways of treating you, which induce in you a state amenable to what he wants. It's in the same way that these propaganda arrays are directed at the public. So again, the Mystery Shopper Wawa Club. Okay, so the Mystery Shopper venue is already seen to be a quasi-legitimate activity, but of course nepotism and Fifth Columnry will easily want to take full control of that, because that's just another carrot on the stick, a carrot that they can offer to those that they would recruit into their other venues. Plus, look at the talent required for it. It's exactly the same talent and activity required for just being an embedded operative in any given environment. So, acting and showbiz fall into the same venue. The media falls into the same category generally. And Covert Fifth Columnry as a whole is exemplified by the mobile, weaponized form of the mystery shopper, the groups of people who can be shipped around the country or from town to town. Crisis actors is one concrete example of them, but just any kind of operative and groups of operatives who perform the activity of filling areas with their presence, which displaces, by the way, people who would have been there or might have gone there, or to surround and insulate with a kind of active denial of service environment, so that you're denied the service of a real, legitimate social or situational environment, and you're left instead with the mystery shopper Wawa Club. Now, where does Wawa come from? Well, I said I'd leave that a mystery, but I'll go ahead and unravel that right now. Wawa is a multi-dimensional term, as several layers of semantics fuse in significantly into this one term. One is that, Charlie Brown, the cartoon, the teacher's in the background just displaying the noise of being a teacher. It's wah, 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 wah. The only thing that matters is Charlie Brown and his cadre of cartoon characters and their interactions, right? So Wawa represents that background acting, that background presence of the covert fifth operatives, covert fifth columnists, and those other types of operatives that get into that, doing their thing in the background, like wah, 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 wah. Also, wah-wah recordings of that sort are made in order to add realism to games, and by the way, exactly what extras are in the background of, say, a show like, any show, but take for example, the people in the cafe in Seinfeld. Notice no matter what hysterics are going on at the table, unless no matter what's going on, they're just blissfully in their own world, just doing their own thing. But then they there's kind of like an orchestrator behind it all. Thank you. Who in the background kind of can sometimes redirect them to say, okay, pay a little more attention. Act like this was a little weird and did draw you away from your coffee, or don't. And it can be very fine-tuned, and as fine-tuned as needed to get the effect. And they are very specific about the aesthetic that they're looking for, and the degree of realism and the degree of absurdity and all these different factors. Okay, so if they can do that for a show like Seinfeld, it's plainly evident that groups of talent could be redirected from such projects into the mainstream of social activities in order to infiltrate areas, to surround persons, to act as harassment units, to act as derealization catalysts, to cause some or individuals or groups to have an environment that derealizes some elements of it. For example, psychological experiments have been conducted to show that if a large group of students are manifest